Hey guys, we're Rick and Jill Andrews, and Michael asked us to record just a little bit of our testimony and our story. I'm gonna let Jill do the vast majority of the talking and conversation just because she's so much more well-spoken than I am. But like I said, we're Rick Andrews and Jill Andrews, and we have been married going on 23 years this July. 23 years. Did you ever think we'd be married 23 years?
No.
Or did you kill me about 10 years in?
About to kill you now.
About to kill me now, just because of having conversation? This is how real marriage is. This is you love someone so much that you throw them under the bus and they threaten to kill you. This is just the way it works. But we are high school sweethearts. We started dating when we were 16 years old. Jill was 17. She's 4 months older than me, so she's a cradle robber. And I was irresistible and in high school, not like I am now. So I way out kicked my coverage for my spouse at Theodore. Anything you want to say? There's nothing you want to say?
I'm gonna let you keep talking.
You're gonna let me keep talking? She's gonna let me keep digging a hole in the ground for myself to fall in. But our story is, man, it's long and interesting. So just try to give y'all a little piece of it. Is, man, we were like I said, high school sweethearts. We had a history teacher that we had class with that thought she was going to embarrass us or maybe myself by telling the whole class that I liked Jill, and that kind of backfired on the teacher and Jill because it didn't embarrass me at all, but I think it may have turned Jill's face a little red, possibly. She handed out papers in the class and said, "Rick likes Jill, Rick likes Jill, Rick likes Jill." And I was like, "Yep, sure do. Absolutely." But again, like most young kids that in a relationship, man, we just thought that we were indestructible and in love and puppy love and smitten. Were you smitten with me?
Yeah.
You were? Was. Are you still smitten with me?
Mm-hmm.
See? Look at there. I still got it. But, man, I genuinely don't think that we argued for the first 2 years of dating. Like zero. Like just everything was fine. Got through high school. I worked construction right out of high school, so I did a few little jobs traveling here and there. And then from the time we started dating in January, on her birthday, January 13th of 99, and then married 3.5 years later, and that non-argument and just being kind of passive about everything kind of stopped right before we got married to our first part of years of our marriage. And I may have been difficult to live with, just a little bit. Difficult, is that a good word? Difficult to live with?
At times.
Tell me your thoughts of the first few years of our marriage.
Like he said, the first few years were really pretty easy for us. We got along great. We were best friends. We didn't really argue. It was just we went to work and we came home, and we just did life. And up until about 3 years in, I would say, is probably when we first started arguing and having financial troubles and those kinds of things. This real life happened. You go into marriage and you have these unrealistic expectations of what life is going to be like, that everything's just going to be romance and butterflies, and real life happens and it's just not that way.
Not all rainbows and Skittles.
Not always.
So a lot of people have heard this story, this part of our story, and starting on that financial crunch of getting into real life and real marriage, when the butterflies and you don't want to make each other mad, and every little thing that each other do, you're going to just overlook that thing. And man, if I do premarital counseling now, I tell people, listen, the thing that you can put up with right now that just bothers you a little bit, you need to address that thing, because 20 years in, 10 years in, it may just be the thing that you cannot stand. But you think that you can feel like you can outlove the genuine aggravation that those little things. Scripture says, to mind the little foxes. It's not the the great big tragedies that come along so much as those little everyday sins and just the little foxes in the vineyard. And so little bitty things would be like we would overextend ourselves and spend too much money because we had no idea what to do about finances other than just buy everything that you possibly can to make yourself happy and fill all the void that you have. We weren't following the Lord. We had started our relationship dating. Jill was going to a small local Baptist church here in Mobile, and that was kind of like, hey, if you're going to date me, you got to go to church with me. So we had started going to church myself mainly just to be with her. So just going through the motions, I was really good at convincing her that I had it together and that I was at least open to, if not already, a pretty serious follower of Christ. And we both kind of, through those first couple years of marriage, would see where some of the things that we may profess, we either one of us were actually just sold out to and following. It was kind of like the whole you're in the South, you're born in church, so therefore you're a Christian by nature only. And so those little things like that, especially financial, like our main issue in those years was financial. So this part of the story that some people have heard of our testimony, whether it be at ministry events that we've done, like at Trace Diaz, or whether it be our church families, we had a Saturday that we had ordered pizza. Melanie, our oldest, she's about to be 18 now. She was about a year and a half old at this time. We had ordered pizza. This is back in the old days when people kept a checkbook register. So I had written the amount down for the pizza and delivery and everything in the checkbook, saw that the money was completely low, just an issue, and I basically just started in on Jill about, like it wasn't my fault as well, the financial state we were in, but just started in on, we can't keep living like this, we can't do this, this is just something. And we had fed Melanie, probably Jill at that time had fed Melanie. She was sitting in her little high chair in the kitchen. Jill was doing the dishes, loading the dishwasher. I'm trying to have a conversation with her, and I'm not a big believer in multitask. Asked her repeatedly to stop loading the dishwasher and let's talk about this. And my sweet little wife is not the best one to be told what to do at times. So she wouldn't stop loading the dishwasher, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. I'm trying to think back to the exact memory of it, but at one point I was actually saying, please, just please stop loading the dishwasher. And her comment to me was, I can't help it if you can't do two things at one time. I can load this dishwasher and listen to you fuss at the same time. So when she wouldn't stop, I shut the dishwasher for her, separated from the countertop, and began to continue the conversation. As you can imagine, she wasn't in the best mood with that. Anything to say at that point on the, no, I'll make myself look bad enough, thank you. So I was against the countertop, talking to her, and of course at that point, that's a pretty loud and I would say, I guess, a violent outburst in that way. So she had asked me, look, you need to get out of my face. And I said, I'm backed up against the countertop. I'm not in your face. If you feel like you need space, then back up, because I can't go any further. You can imagine the conversation was over at that point of any headway on what we were starting to deal with, because now I had done something stupid, and that was my nature a lot back in those days. And I got frustrated, she got frustrated, so I got mad, went to the other end of the house, to the bedroom, and as soon as I shut the door, I just beat the backside of the door out. And I'm kind of known for saying this part, I guess, this is the part that sticks in people's memories. I was beating on the door and I heard her keys come off, drag off the counter like that. And I genuinely will never forget the sound, because it was like a prodigal son moment. Like I came to myself, realized, this is stupid and I'm about to lose everything. So ran back in the room saying, I'm done, I'm sorry, apologizing. Obviously, Jill felt unsafe enough at that point to where she grabbed Melanie, picked her up, tried to go out. The house we had, the kitchen had a door out to the carport area, and then we had a formal dining room in front of that that was sectioned off, and you could go out the front door or the side door kind of close to each other. And she tried to get out one door. I stopped her, just got in her way. She tried to get to the other door. We did that a couple of rounds of her trying to go through one door or the other when we just stopping her. She got at one point close enough to the front screen door to get it open, so the front door and then the screen door open. And I thought, man, if somebody sees this, they're not going to care the story at all. They're not going to think that I'm not trying to hurt her. They're just going to call the law. So she got out the door, ran around the house to her car, and then by God's grace, and I'm praying out loud. I'm crying like the whole world's falling apart at that point. And I say this is grace of God that, you know, she cared about the safety of our kids, so she stopped to put Melanie in the car seat, and I got in the back seat on the driver's side. So if she was going, I was going too, and convinced her to go back inside and let's talk. And we sat on the couch, and if I remember correctly, her words at that point, it was an ultimatum of this isn't going to happen anymore. And you're not the father or husband that you said you were going to be or that I thought you were going to be. And there wasn't any argument with that. That was the truth. So I did. I made a doctor's appointment, began talking to them. I was teaching Sunday school at the time, so I had to go in, teach Sunday school to either 7th and 8th grade boys or 9th and 10th grade boys at the time, with skin up knuckles from beating a door at the house. Went to a friend of mine who was the pastor and said, man, I genuinely don't even know if I'm saved with an attitude like this. We counseled through that process, and I don't know if you got anything from your point of view or perspective during that particular time of kind of what your mind said or
No,
from
during
just
that,
past.
the main thing for me was I had to get my children or my child out of that situation. It was a volatile situation, and I never feared for my life or my safety, but I wasn't going to bring a child up in a home like that. And so for me, that was it. You know, I was done. You know, we had already had several arguments leading up to that point, and when it got to that point to where I felt like it was directed at me, I wasn't going to take the chance of it being me or being my child. So for me, that was the answer at the time, was we just have to leave, and we're just done.
And that was actually between like a time in our life when we were very active, just had been very active at church. And we
had only been active in the church about
right around the time, probably 6 months before Melanie was born.
Yeah.
So maybe a year and a half to 2 years in church at that time. That was another big part that sticks in my mind about, we had an excellent Sunday school group. Our Sunday school class was tight and in each other's lives, and not just superficial go say hey for an hour and leave. Like we lived pretty close and had events and things, and we could talk to them about things. That just stuck out in my mind as a crucial part of our ability to stick that out was our church family.
Yeah, we did. We had a really close-knit community that we actually did life with. We didn't just go to church with. It was a community of people that we were actively involved in each other's lives multiple times a week, outside of church and inside of church. And I think that was a huge encouragement for us to know that we had people, and we had already built relationships with people that had been through hard times in their marriage. So we had people that we could lean on and openly share and be vulnerable with about where we were.
I can say that would have been probably right before, several weeks before our first Trace Diaz weekend. Not to make it a Trace Diaz testimony per se, but one of the things that the Lord did for us was the church home that we were in at the time, that small group that we had, or Sunday school class that we had, and the kind of relentless mentor and sponsor that we had for our Trace Diaz retreat the first time. It was just a perfect alignment of God doing that and walking that through the whole time, because we had just had a conversation sitting on the couch, like you're saying, hey, what do you want to eat for supper? Look, if we get divorced, not going to be the end of the world. It's not the biggest thing in the world. We'll make it. You know, it's not going to kill either one of us. It's just going to be not good, but it is what it is. That, like, there was a lot of, I had shut down a lot of her emotional, what would you say, just the...
Yeah, I had just really disconnected myself. I had been hurt emotionally many times through the years, and just really and truly was just sticking it out because I didn't want my kid to grow up in a divorced household. And that's not a healthy way to live for anybody. It's not healthy for the child. It's not healthy for any of the parties. And we just got to the point of where I had so many walls up to where I was not going to let him hurt me. And he, I think I could say from you, just was tired of trying. You know, I just wasn't letting him in anymore. And so we just had a conversation one day of, you know, where do we go from here? If we divorce, okay. And really the only reason we didn't end up in an attorney's office is we couldn't afford it.
Yeah, it was so bad we couldn't afford the no contest divorce that time, $500 or $600. But I think too, this is important for people that are listening as far as struggling or in relationships is this. There's always going to be a party that's more at fault. That's a given. But neither side is innocent to the fact that I had done a lot of things to shut down her feelings towards me. And in doing that, I think that I can say for you that her shutting down those emotions and feelings gave me no way to improve and no way, because I felt, as men, I think it's easy to get really discouraged and feel hopeless very easily, because you can fool the whole world and make them think that you're a man if your wife and children don't think you are. That's an issue. And the reverse is true. If the whole world's against you and your wife says that you're enough, then everybody else just go jump. But in that time, I would literally tell her, man, if I keep making the changes to the list that you give me, and there still gets to be another list after that, like there was just no hope. There was no, I was convinced, and I think this is a demonic issue, convinced with all the thoughts that I had that were not from the Lord, had to come from the devil himself, that there was no way she would ever look at me like she did in high school. There was no way that no matter what I did that we could ever fix and repair the damage that we had done to one another. But of course I had to focus on, I'm a pretty good critic of my own self. I always have been my biggest issue myself. So it's easy for me to get down on that and think that there's absolutely no hope for restoration and reconciliation.
How long was y'all married at this point?
At this point, we would have been married, so we got married in 2002. Melanie was born in 07, so this would have been literally about the middle of 2008. We went to Trace Diaz in 2008, October of 08. So this happened between those times of us getting into church in 06. Like, there's a whole lot of just my personal testimony that happened in that year. We had a miscarriage, and at the beginning of 07, and then, the same year that Melanie was born, because when Melanie was born, there's a whole total different testimony in that. All this to say that we were praying, and especially Jill praying to be pregnant by the time the due date would have been for the first pregnancy, and God answered that prayer, and we were, so with Melanie. So that was about 5 to 6 years, 6 years into our marriage. And man, they talk about the 7-year itch or whatever, but you know that we were. Those 6 years were pretty hellacious, if I can say that. Like that's as believers, I think it's kind of funny, not funny, sorry. This life that we live on earth, no matter what happens, the baddest extent that it can be is the only hell as believers will ever experience. So I think that's safe to say when people want to try to compare things, you know, that was hell on earth. I won't experience the wrath of God. Jill won't experience the wrath of God. We're believers. So the only thing the closest we could even compare what that would be, we were putting ourselves through it. I was definitely putting her through it. And so those were some of the darkest times in our marriage that we've had. So all that to say in that part, I don't think there's, unless you got something in just in general in that time zone or area, like I did what she wanted me to do. Like I even had people say, man, watch out, because if you give in to all these demands or whatever, she's just gonna run over you. It's like, I don't care. I don't make any bones about, next to my salvation and relationship with Christ, Jill's the greatest grace of life that God's ever given me. That is.
So we'll interview. So did you start letting your guard down, or how? Was you still like, hey,
I'm in.
No, not at that point.
You want us to tell the story of that part, the shift?
I guess if you do your part, God will do His part.
Kind of, sort of, in a way. There's the so we had been asked by our sponsor for Trace Diaz a couple times to come. We were like, no, not going to do that. So again, like I said, not to make this a Trace Diaz story, but what God chose to do with us when we went on those first weekends was He spoke to me that weekend and said, you're going to go home and love your wife regardless. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if she doesn't reciprocate. Doesn't matter. Like, genuinely in my mind, because I'm a strong picture guy, that's how I do things. And if I'd have walked in the door and she'd have stabbed me in the guts, all right, let's patch that up and keep going. Like there, I was not given a choice from the Lord to do nothing but stay.
Not doing it for an outcome, doing it.
Yeah, because and I've had people say this, man, I'm doing everything the Bible says a husband's supposed to do, and she's not doing her part. And I go, God don't work that way, in my opinion. Hadn't in my life. You do it because He told you to do it. That's the reason. And He may choose to have that reciprocated, and He may not. That's kind of above my pay grade to say how that particularly works. But I know that to be obedient, even if it doesn't seem successful, is better than to be disobedient. And so I was told on my weekend, come home, and I'll let her tell the me coming home part of how hardened I had caused her to be.
It's probably not my proudest moment, but he came home from his Trace Diaz weekend and he was telling me about the weekend and what the Lord had shown him, and he he came home from Trace Diaz and was telling me about his weekend and all the things that the Lord had shown him and all the things that were going to be different, and he's crying and promising this and promising that, and I just stone cold looked him in the face and I said, I've heard it before. I don't believe you. I've heard it before. And so the way Trace Diaz works is the men go on one weekend and the women go on the following weekend. Well, the following weekend it was my turn, and I have no doubt that Rick was at home praying that God would do something miraculous in me.
Yeah, please God, don't let her stab me in the gut. I'd really like to just have a better outcome.
And He did. It was shown to me very clearly that I had built up a fortress around my heart, and that I wasn't going to let him back in. And during that weekend and the things that transpire on Trace Diaz weekends, I just began to let that wall crumble, and it really was a turning point for us. And once I returned home, things were very different in our home.
I was scared to death until closing on that women's weekend.
We just, once we both had been through the weekend, we were able to talk through some things. We both just decided at that point that our family was going to be rooted in Christ. We were going to live our lives sold out for Christ. We were going to raise Melanie, that we had at the time, and any future children in a godly home, and that really is what God has done in our lives. Like, He has transformed our home into a place where now we have 3 kids that don't have any memories of us ever fighting. They probably don't even recall a time that we argued, because we generally don't. We do disagree, you know, we're not just passive with each other. We do have disagreements, but they're never heated, they're not loud. We're just able to communicate clearly, and that's all because of how God has worked in our lives.
Yeah, so I was around quite a bit of yelling, fussing, fighting growing up. Several different issues and things with that, and that was always from day one. Like, I'm not gonna have my kids involved in this stuff. We're not gonna be yelling and throwing and all that stuff. So like I said, when it turned into that happening that day in the kitchen, that was a big issue in general. So, and it's all I said, just absolutely 100%. There's no way we could have done it on our own. I've been through a ton of counseling. I've listened to a lot of stuff, a lot of good advice and counsel. Even had somebody ask me one time, hey, do you think you just grew up, matured, and just know better now? I'm like, man, I can flip a switch in a second and throw stuff through this house. That's not just me saying I'm not going to do it. The Lord will put His hand, I guess I can say it that way, will put His hand on me before I get too far. And like I said, we've had plenty of ups and downs, 2 steps forward, 1 step back in our 26 years now together. Like, to be from 16 to 43, like it blows my mind. We should be statistically not together, or at least not have a good marriage. And through all this stuff, man, I could tell you story after story of stuff that we've been involved with, and that people have said, or this, or I'm not the easiest person to get along with, so I can cause rifts and problems and things and get a little bit of stuff and shade thrown. But through all those processes, we're more solid now than we ever have been. So I think that's the testimony of, there's some things that we've been through that if our relationship was not what it is today, then there's no way. I feel like I can safely say, not speaking for the Lord, that I wouldn't be here. That's a lot. I got a weird fear of how much I love Jill, that I've told her, hey, look, I might be in danger of loving you more than I would listen to the Lord. Like, I can't explain it, but God's put that in me, I do believe, for a reason. And I hope she knows that, like, there's nothing gonna come to her that's got to go through me first. And instead of being fearful of my explosive behavior and things in that, I hope now it's that she feels very safe, you know. So, like I said, from that, like, man, none of this is easy. I like how Jill says it. We choose each other every day, regardless. There's a pastor I listen to, and he says, man, the real biblical definition of love, it is an act of the will. You do choose one another. It is accompanied by emotion, so it's not emotionally led, so it doesn't get fickle and change with every time that you feel or you don't feel it. And it results in action on behalf of its object. So literally, you choose who you love, you do things, you are emotionally present, and those things are there but not led by them. And you have to do that day in and day out, no matter what little quirks come up. And I think one thing that, I know this has helped me, I don't know if Jill's done this, we hadn't had this conversation about this. When there's things that come up that I know that she struggles with, that affect me, I pray for her to not have to struggle with those things, and God to deliver her and heal those things. It could be, like I said, when you don't have fusses and fights every day, that stuff can look like just a minor disagreement on what we should do with the kids on the weekend, where we should go. Like, I don't want to sound like we're just so boring when it comes to that, but God's done a really good job of putting us on the same page on so many things. We don't have very many things we don't agree on. So with that, when something comes up, I can pray that God touches her in that area, regardless if it affects me in the end or not. Like, it can be genuinely, I want her better. I don't think she should struggle with this area. For her, she probably just spends a lot of time praying for me because I'm about half crazy most of the time. But she used to say that those unrealistic expectations were little girl expectations of marriage. Every little girl plans and hopes and has these dreams and aspirations, and then real life hits and that stuff doesn't look like that anymore. You don't look like you did when you got married after a few years. You don't act like you did. You grow and mature, and you hopefully mature. And it's not easy. And if you think that the devil won't come against a marriage, that's like sometimes number one. Maybe the leadership and pastor of the church is a big target, and marriages is right there with it, because if you can destroy that, you can change a whole lot of stuff in a whole lot of areas. And so it is not for the faint of heart, and I don't think you can do it without God. I think that if you're having a successful marriage and it doesn't have God at the center, be careful. Like, or get ready, because we couldn't